Good evening. This is Beth from Around the Table Yarns in Shaker Heights, Ohio, and tonight is Sock Club for October 2024. Today we are going to be working on Tanis Lavallee's Trusty Toe-Up Socks. So I have a copy of the pattern in front of me. This is a free pattern on Ravelry. So I feel comfortable sharing images of the pattern, but it is a free pattern and you should download it and get it from Ravelry. It comes in 3 adult sizes, small, medium, and large. There we go. I knew I was going to have doggies. Hang on one second. So it comes in 3 sizes, and the pattern gives the sizes here under adult, small, medium, and large as 7.5 inches, 8 inches, and 9 inches unstretched circumference. So if you measure around your foot and your foot measures 9 inches, you should do a slightly smaller size. If you measure around your foot and your foot measures 8 inches, you should do a smaller size. But these are general sizes, and then these do stretch up enough to go over your heel and your ankle. And we have talked in the past about sizing for socks and checking our gauge for socks, and I'm not going to be talking about that tonight. So if that's information you need, that is in our Sock Club recordings from the beginning of the year. We usually talk about that first thing in January, and if you need help finding that, please drop me a line at info@aroundthetableyarns.com and I'll find you the correct link. Okay, so this sock, the reason I picked this sock is because it is done from the toe up. So we're going to start at the toe and move up to the heel. For the heel, we're going to do the afterthought heel because I think that's just a skill that is really handy to have and to know how to do. And then we'll continue up to the leg. The number of stitches, once you've increased the toe up to the foot, the number of stitches here and on the leg should be the same. If you have a different size foot than your leg, you can increase the number of stitches in the leg. But generally speaking, the way that you work a toe-up sock with an afterthought heel is you essentially knit like a tube sock, placing some holder stitches on half of your stitches to come back later and work the heel. So what I'm planning to do is show you how to do Judy's Magic Cast On, how to do the increases for the toe box, how to figure out where to stop for your heel. And then the plan is for you to go from here today and knit the entire sock up to your bind off. And then you can leave the bind off on a holder and do the other sock in the meantime, or if that's as far as you get, what we'll talk about in our second session, which is in December, on December 9th, is how to do a very elastic bind off, and then picking up and doing the heel from our placeholder stitches, and then finishing that heel. So those are the 2 things or the 3 things that we're going to work on in December. So today it's the cast on, the increases for the toes, and where to put the placeholder stitches for the heel. And then your assignment will be to work to the end of the sock. So any questions about that so far? I don't see anybody raising a hand. All right. I am going to show the Judy's Magic Cast On. I really like this cast on because I find it sort of satisfyingly simple, not simple to do. It can be a little bit confusing to do, but I hope that, having this on a video, it makes it possible. I just move my camera up a little bit and straighten it. I'm going to move my pattern out of the way. The sock that I am doing is the the medium size. And so the directions for that start on the second page. You've got abbreviations and how to work short rows. And we're not going to be doing the short row section though. So I am here at the top of the page where it says, using Judy's Magic cast on 20, 24, or 28 stitches. I'm going to be doing the middle size. So I'm going to do 24 stitches, which means 12 stitches on my 2 needles. I am going to be doing this on circular needles. Even if you plan to use double pointed needles for your sock, you do need to use circular needles to do Judy's Magic cast on. So this is not the yarn that I'm using for my sock, but I wanted to use something that would show up nicely on the video. And so it's for demonstration purposes. So using a tail long enough to work 12 or 24 stitches. So, I've got about 18 inches, 20 inches there. You're going to hold the needles parallel and next to each other, facing towards the left. I think of this needle as the top needle, and this is the bottom needle. So I hold them parallel, facing towards my left, and I simply put the tail, I slide the tail in between the needles, so it's over the top needle. And then I want to make the tail long enough to make all of my stitches. So there I've got my 18 inches. And then I'm going to reverse or change places. So my tail is in front and my working yarn is behind. And I'm just going to swap them. So the tail is now over my pointer finger and the working yarn is over my thumb. So this becomes my first stitch. It's just twisted on the upper needle. And my second stitch needs to go on the bottom needle. So think of this as the top needle and the bottom needle, and the pointer is your top finger and your thumb is your bottom finger. So I'm going to bring my top finger below the bottom needle and bring the yarn over the bottom needle into the middle. I'm going to bring my thumb up to the middle and take that yarn over the top needle to make a new stitch. So my needles, top and bottom, we add the stitch with the yarn that's being fed from the opposite side of my hand. So if this is my top and my bottom, when I'm doing the bottom needle, I want to use my top finger. And notice how I go from the bottom of the needle into the center when I do the center one. And when I do the top one, I go from the bottom of the needle over the top. And so you just pivot and go, whoops. So now so I've got 1, 2, 3. So I need a third one on the bottom needle. So I pivot so that the pointer finger yarn can come over. And then I pivot so that the thumb yarn can come between and on top. So it looks like this on the other side. Try not to let go of your yarn. So I'm holding the yarns between my pinky and my ring finger. 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's the bottom and then the top. The bottom. So when I feed the yarn, I feed it around the needle from the bottom towards the top every time. And the reason for that is how we wrap typically when we make a stitch. And so I want to mimic that. So there's my yarn. I'm just going to check and see if I have all the stitches I want. Come back into focus. Oh, came into focus and then it went upside down. Okay. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, and then 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. Okay. I find that if I turn this towards me, I tend to get my yarn tangled. And so I like to move the yarn and the needles like I'm going from sunrise and then it's following the sun and going to sunset. So I pivot my needle around without turning it and getting tangled in the cable and the points and the working yarn and the tail. I want to hold the tail out of my way. And what I've done by pivoting it from left to right is I've made my top needle the bottom needle, and my bottom needle is now the top. My working yarn is attached to that stitch, and I'm going to gently pull the bottom needle, the now bottom needle, out until I make enough of a loop to turn and work these stitches. Go into the stitches knitwise and work with the working yarn, and it can be a little bit loose there because of the tail, but you're just going to make a normal stitch. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And as you work these, you'll find that the right leg of the stitch, the leading leg of the stitch, is in front the way it's supposed to be. And when you turn it again, so I'm ready to work the other side. So I finished. My stitches came off of the other needle. So I have one needle in place that I've been knitting onto, and this is the needle that I knitted off of. So I'm going to pivot again to the right. My working yarn is attached to the last stitch I made, which is there. So I push my loose needle into the stitches, so they're parallel again, before I pull out my other needle. So the other needle is the one that the working yarn is attached to. And now I'm going to knit into the other side. I like to pull pretty firmly when I start this because there tends to be a little bit of looseness in this first row. And you want it to be relatively firm. You want a nice firm toe. So again, I'm going to just work across in the knit stitch all of the 12 stitches. So this is how we get 24. There's 12 on each needle. And if you're doing a different size, you'll have the correct number for your size. So this counts as toe round 1, knit 1 round. I've done both sides. Now, as I get back to the beginning of my round, I'm going to take a second and pull my tail out so that it is dangling out of the toe as I continue working. This is how I can tell, this is how I mark the beginning of my round. So I don't put a marker onto my needles. I have the toe, the tail, the toe, the working yarn, I can't even remember what I'm talking about, dangling from here. I can show you on the toe of my sock that I've done up till now. So here's the sock I was working on, and you can see how this working yarn is dangling out on the right-hand side of my toe. That means that I'm about to start the beginning of a new round. So that is a visual marker for me that helps me keep track of my of where I am in the project. So again, pull the tail out so it's ready when you start this next round. And this is the round that we're going to do increases on. The designer, Tanis Lavallee, has asked you to do knit one in the front and back in the first stitch here, and then work to the second to last stitch. So the reason for that is that when you do a knit in the front and the back, it places the new stitch here to the left of the stitch that you're working on. And I'll demonstrate that in just a second. But that means that your extra stitch, your new stitch for the increase, is between stitch 1 and 2. So if you work to the very end and you do a knit front and back, then it places the new stitch outside after the final stitch. So to get it in the right place to be symmetric, you want to work it in the second to last stitch so that it snuggles up between the second to last stitch and the last stitch, and it looks like it's symmetric. So this is an asymmetric increase. When you do a knit one in front and back, it's asymmetric. It's always on the left side of the stitch. And so you have to plan for where it's going to be located to make it look symmetric across your row. So again, I've pushed my loose needle back into the stitches first. That gives me a big loop on the left-hand side. That means that when I pull out my lower needle, or the needle that my working yarn is attached to, I still have a loop here, and I can make a loop on the right side as well. I'm going to knit into the front and the back of the first stitch. So I go into the stitch normally and knit into the first leg, the front leg, the leading leg of the stitch. And then I pivot my needles around to catch into the back leg of the stitch. See that? Work that as a normal knit stitch. I did not remove the old stitch when I did the first half of this increase, but I do now. And see how that old stitch, the top of the old stitch, becomes a horizontal line. It almost looks like a purl bump in between the first and the second stitch. We're going to get a little closer in so you can see that. Let's hope that we get a little. There we go. Oh, we're a little grainy today. Maybe we need a little more light. That help? Sometimes it takes a minute for it to. Just to come into focus a little bit better. So what I'm hoping you see is that there's this little, it almost looks like a purl bump at the bottom of this stitch, and that's between stitches 1 and 2 now. And then you continue. So I get to 2 stitches before the end, and now I'm going to repeat that increase. I'm going to knit the leading leg, and then I'm going to move my needle to get back into the trailing leg of my stitch, creating a second new stitch. So now on this side of my work, I have 14. Pivot. If you're new to working with Magic Loop, one of the things that you need to be careful of, one, is to always put your needle in first. I was working with somebody today and I said, push your needle back in. And she went and she grabbed the cable and she pulled the cable, and that worked the first time. And I said, be careful with that, because sometimes you grab the wrong cable and you pull the needle out that's here, and it pulls it out of your stitches, and then you have to get it back in. And she was like, oh, and I said, ask me how I know that. And that's how I used to do it. I used to pull the needles and then I would pull it right out. So then the next thing she tried it again and she pulled it out of the stitches. So it was like, okay. So it's really important to, when you're pushing the needle in, to make sure that it's that needle. If you want to pull it, that's fine, but really double check that you're pulling on the correct needle if you're going to do that. So now I have 12 stitches on the other side. I need to increase again in the same places. And you can see that this is a little bit loose here. That's because it was from the beginning of our 6, 8, 10, 12. I have my 12 stitches. So I'm going to go into that stitch. What I want to make sure that you do is that you don't wrap the yarn inadvertently around the needle to make the stitch. So you don't want the yarn to be in front and then you yarn over as you're making that stitch. That creates an extra stitch outside of your toe, and you don't want to do that. So I had a good friend who said, always put your yarn up like that when you're about to start. Sorry, up like it's actually up over that needle. But you want to make sure that the path of the working yarn does not go around the right needle as you're making this new stitch. And I like to pull pretty firmly on the first stitch. And then I'm going to, again, do my increase. There, and then work across to the last stitch, last 2 stitches. Sometimes I find that my loop is a little bit constricted. I usually put my thumb through the loop like this, and that's fine. But if you find that it's a little constricting, you can pull a little bit of slack off from the other side. So here's my last increase and my last stitch. And then we rotate again, push your needle back into the stitches. Depending on what kind of needle you have, I'm using Chow-Goos, which are very smooth at the joins and go right in where I want them to. Remember, we're keeping the tail out. Sometimes if you have a needle that's not as smooth here at the join, it's easier to push this needle in almost all the way before you bring this one out. And then once these are on the cable, it makes it easier to push that one all the way in. So that can be helpful if you're having a little struggle getting into there. All right, so now we're going to do a plain round. And when you do a plain round, I just want to show you that as I go into this stitch, my working yarn is coming from here. So you can see there's a little distance between where the working yarn is coming out of and the stitch that I'm about to make. I want to really bring those together. See how physically closer they are when I make my stitch? I'm pulling more firmly than I would normally pull on a stitch because I want there not to be a loose line of stitches or a ladder of stitches at the edge. So I'm firmer on that first stitch, and then I loosen up as I go into that increase stitch, and I resume normal tension. After that first stitch, all the way through that side of the stitches, I resume normal tension. It's only on the first one that I pull any differently. Okay, so that brings us back into this other side. Again, we're going to keep pulling firmly on those edge stitches. To help them take shape. And then I just want to show you how this starts to look. You can see the toe is starting to fold. And as you continue to make stitches on the sides, it will increase and it will come out at a diagonal, and it will look like this. So you're going to do the increase every other round. So there's a round of plain knitting and then the increase round and then plain knitting and then an increase round and plain knitting and an increase round until you have the total number of stitches that you want for your toe. It creates a toe that's like a parallelogram, or not, is that a trapezoid? Not a parallelogram, a trapezoid. Some people don't like a toe this shape. And if that's the case, the way that you could change that is to start with more stitches and have fewer increases to get to the final number of toe stitches, of foot stitches, sorry. Or you could follow in reverse the shaping of a top-down toe that you like. So like some toes have increase, 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 and then increase every other round for a while. But the point is that you want to, in about this many rows, get to the full foot number. So in this case, I have 32 across each side. So I started with 12 and I have 32. So I increased one stitch on each end 10 times to get to that. So this is about 20 rows of knitting. Once you've done that, you're going to continue working without any more increases on the stitches as they've been set. There's no pattern in this. If you want to introduce a pattern, do keep in mind that it can change your gauge. Lace can make it looser, cables can make it tighter. Textured stitches may not have a big effect, but lace and cables can definitely have an effect. And if you're doing any color work, that can certainly have an effect. So how far should you go before you stop to do your heel? This is how far I went. And when I try this on, before I put this double pointed needle in, when I try this on, this comes right up to the top of my foot. So I just want to kind of show you on this diagram because I can't really bring my foot up to the camera in a really effective way. The heel is here in this sock. So this line is where the heel is. And it was set that marker or the placeholder stitches were placed after this stripe, this dark blue stripe. So if you look at the sock, there's the toe shaping, and then there's this is all the same number of stitches all the way up to here. And then this was the beginning of the round where they placed it. So if you kind of imagine a foot as being something that, you know, bends here, oh, ooh, put that away. This is the point that you're going to stop. So your sock, if you pull it up to just about here, this is how far it should be. And what she says is that this would be about 2 inches shy of the back of your foot. I tend to not do it by inches. I tend to do it by how it fits on my foot. But if you measure your foot, if you stand on a ruler and you measure your foot and your foot is 9 inches long, then when you get to 7 inches, that's where you would stop to do the toe. So if you're following the way that she writes it in the directions, you would subtract the number that she suggests. And here's the instructions: knit and stockinette stitch until the foot measures 2 inches shorter than the desired measurement from the tip of the toe to the end of the heel. So that's where we are. But I found that if you knit so that it goes to here, that's just about exactly the same place. So if you're trying it on as you go, do slide it onto the cables. because if it's on the needles, it'll be harder to try on. So you'll want it to be on the flexible part of the cables. Okay, so that's where my foot is. It's a good thing to count the number of rows that that is from the top of your toe or even from the beginning of your sock, because you're going to want to place the heel in the same place in the second sock. So counting the stitches is pretty straightforward, especially if you're using self-striping sock yarn. Here's my last increase, right about there. So counting from that there's my last increase, there's that little dot. And I would count above that to count the rows since my toe was finished. So 1, 2, 3, I'm just counting the V's. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40, 41, 2, 3, 4, 5, 46, 47, 48 is the last orange one. Unroll. 49, 51, 2, 3, and 4 is on the needle. So I have 54 rows above my toe shaping. Okay. I had put these on a holder as I was using my needles for something else. So I've just, for the purposes of tonight, I've put it back onto a double pointed needle of the same size. And I'm going to use a smooth cotton to place my afterthought heel. So to place the afterthought heel, it's going to be across what will become the heel of the sock. So right now they're identical, but I always place my heel on the first half of my stitches. And all I have to do to place them is leaving a short tail. I'm going to knit the smooth cotton yarn across all of the stitches. And then I'm going to replace the stitches with the smooth cotton yarn back onto the left needle. If you do it with a double pointed needle, you don't have to slide them back on though. You can just go back to the other end of the needle. So this is a nice little trick. If you have access to a double pointed needle of the right size, you can go ahead and use it. It doesn't even have to be exactly the right size. It just should be a smallish size. But if you work the row of waste yarn with a double pointed needle, when you get to the end of that row, all you have to do is cut off the waste yarn in place. You could leave it enough to tie, or just leave enough that it's long and it won't, come slithering out. So here's my tail from leaving at the beginning, and here's my other tail. Just going to cut them about the same amount. And then I can continue working with my working yarn. So here is my working yarn. This is the yarn I'm using to hold it, but here's my working yarn, and it's right in place, and I can just go ahead and knit across those stitches, and then you just continue and you work until you're getting to the top of your leg. And that can be however long you want it to be. So the row that comes after the waste yarn is the beginning of the top of the leg. In the photo, that's this row here. So if you want a shorter sock, you can stop after a couple of inches. If you want a longer sock, you can knit as far as you would like to. We were talking in class today that if you really wanted to make it snugger on your leg, you could start ribbing sooner. Most sock patterns have you rib just at the very end, but if you wanted to have a more snug leg, you could start ribbing in this section and have it rib all the way up like a sports sock would. So that's an option that you could employ, or you could even start your ribbing sooner in the sock if you like to. I was making mittens for Maeve recently and I was complaining about how much I don't like to do ribbing. So you can tell that I will not be ribbing the entire leg of my sock. Okay, so that's all of the information that I wanted to get get out to you guys today. Just checking to make sure I've done all of the things that were on my list. Yeah. Our next session will be on December 7th, or December 9th, sorry. And this video will be posted on our website well, I may not get it up by the end of the evening tonight, but I will definitely get it up by tomorrow. I'm back in the dark. Here, wait. Light. Let there be light. I'm here in the light. So I'll get it done. It takes a few minutes to convert from a recording to a file that I can download onto the YouTube. But as soon as it finishes that, I try and get it done before I go to work in the morning. So I'll have the video up on the website as soon as possible, and then it will be accessible to you for free. You don't have to sign in or do anything different. If you want to be notified when new videos go up, you can follow us on YouTube. Otherwise, we'll continue to notify you about them through the website or post them on the website. Any questions? No? All right, I'm going to stop the recording. Have a wonderful rest of your month. I hope you enjoy making your socks, and we look forward to having you join us for picking up the Afterthought heel later.